Broadcasting live from the Free Speech Studios. Deep within the city of Fantom. With over 4 years of satisfying the curious mind and looking damn sexy while doing it. Ladies and gentlemen, Fantom Fact Society.
Welcome, everybody, to Fantom Fact Society on a wonderful Sunday afternoon where we have very special guests from citizensdoge.com coming on to the show to discuss their organization in New Hampshire and hopefully nationwide. So we're very excited for that. Just give you an idea of what Citizen Doge has been up to. They just did get this endorsement. Wanted to play it.
My name is Commissioner David Loveland Jr., and I proudly support New Hampshire's Citizens Doge. I support New Hampshire Citizens Doge because it's about a Big Ten bipartisan opportunity to bring communities together to make a better impact for their local town. Fiscal responsibility is something everyone agrees upon, and better fiscal management in local municipalities means more money in your pocketbook, your neighbor's pocketbook, and more value, more bang for your buck at the local level. Please join me in supporting New Hampshire Citizens Doge. You will make a huge impact.
So without further ado, let's welcome Michael and welcome back Andy to the show. Guys, thank you so much for taking time out of your Sunday to come on Fantom Facts and discuss what you're doing. You guys been pretty busy through this summer.
Absolutely.
Now, just to clarify, you're not the Doge Tesla Elon Musk Doge, right? You all are driving Teslas out there in New Hampshire.
No, we were actually discussing that earlier. We can go into the longer story of it, but no, we're not officially affiliated with Doge, Trump, or Elon Musk.
Okay, all right. So, now whose brainchild is this organization? Would you say is Andy?
Oh no.
No. Oh, okay.
Oh no. It's Mike's.
This is Mike. Mike, when did this come to you, or like what is the progression that leads to whatever Citizens Doge is?
Yeah, so I can give you the story and how it kind of ties in, and it'll tie in how Andy came involved too. So I worked for the Trump campaign here in New Hampshire. I was a Hillsborough County field director, so I covered some of the major cities in New Hampshire, including Manchester, Nashua. So they're just some of the bigger cities in New Hampshire. And then throughout the primary, I ran Hillsborough County. After the primary, they sent all of our field staff to other states. So Trump really focused on the battleground states, as we all know. And kind of New Hampshire only had 4 delegates, so they kind of left us to kind of fend for ourselves. And interesting, not sure most of your audience might know, but New Hampshire is first in the nation primary. So after the Iowa caucus, New Hampshire is the first state to vote. So that kind of gives us our claim to fame as far as politics wise. So during the primaries, I mean, we had every candidate. Trump was here probably, at least 2 or 3 times every month for about a year and a half. Trump came to my office. We were doing rallies all the time. And then in between that, you had like Vivek and all these other candidates coming constantly to New Hampshire. So
let's pause right there, Michael, because how involved up to this point were you in politics before you started working the campaign? Or, had you been involved in politics all your life, or what's the history there? Why are you all of a sudden working for Trump's campaign?
That's actually a great question. I sometimes ask myself how it happened. So I voted for Trump in 16, 20. I went to some rallies in 2020. But as far as my political career, I had actually no experience. I did some minor volunteer work for Ron Paul. So Ron Paul was my guy back in like 2008 that kind of I saw the light through. He was talking about ending the Fed and a lot of stuff he was talking about, 20, 30 years ago, is now coming to fruition now.
What age are you when you're listening to Ron Paul, would you say?
Oh God, I was. I remember being literally in middle school. I kid you not. I was listening
Really?
to Alex Jones and Ron Paul in like middle school, and all my friends were like, running around playing video games or doing whatever kids do, and I'm like, dude, the world is going down, like all this stuff, like the reptilians, whatever. I was just like, it was crazy, but
Don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
I mean, you said Alex Jones' name. We are required here at Phantom Facts
that's
to
funny.
have
Yeah.
public service announcement. I'm sorry, I mean middle school though. Okay, and was there someone that introduced you to this world, or did you stumble across it on your own?
So I had a friend who introduced me to Alex Jones back then. I think it was literally after 9/11, and kind of like around the Iraq wartime. Um, was like, all right, something's up, with like Iraq and all that. Obviously the Osama bin Laden stuff. I'm like, why is the whole world chasing around this terrorist? It's like shouldn't be hard to find one person. So you just like see certain things, and I was just started questioning, things even back then, in high school and middle school. So,
Well, and I think
um,
that was the appeal of Trump because it was a culmination of our generation realizing that, we realized that the Bushes were very corrupt and he was employing corrupt Republicans behind him. And so that party felt very lost. And then Obama comes in, usurps Hillary Clinton with this hope and change, which, for me, that it would be my first time of voting age, and I remember the amount of um, really positivity behind the Obama movement in a state like Iowa, South Dakota a little less. They have, but it's South Dakota. But Iowa definitely, which usually goes Republican, was very swayed by the message Obama was preaching. And then, Obama gets in office and he's just as bad, if not worse, in some instances. And there becomes this disillusionment with political speak. And all of a sudden, the most crass person that's been marketed to us, Donald Trump, which, I lived in New York for several years, and I know that style of talk, I mean, you guys are from, you know that area very well, but for Midwesterners, it's very off-putting, but I'd grown to know that culture very well on the East Coast. And the thing I marveled about it was the ability to speak your mind without being worried about the pleasantries. Midwest is. I was raised as a door knocking Jehovah's Witness, and so in the
wow.
Midwest, before you got to your point, you had to talk about the crops, the soil content, the humidity with the tomatoes. And in New York, it was very different. It was, get to the point right away, and it was a respect thing. And Trump communicates that way, especially in 2016 against people like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. And I wonder, did you guys experience sort of the same fascination with Trump that maybe this would be someone that could really, if anything, shake up the system?
Yeah, I'll let Andy go, and then I'll jump back into my story.
Sure. So my background with Trump, I would say, is very complicated. I actually had a chance to see one of his very earliest rallies when he came through New Hampshire about a month after he announced for president in 2015. But it was all pretty much from a voyeuristic point of view of thinking, well, he's going to be gone from the race in a matter of weeks, so I better catch him now if he's rolling through my area. I never had really the slightest indication that he was going to go anywhere. But to what you said, Corey, he just caught such a wave of understanding what people were feeling if they were falling behind the system, particularly the meritocratic system. And I had a family member who has since passed away who I wish I could have a conversation with now about him, because almost everything that he said about Trump in 2015 and 2016, he's been proven right about. And to think that Trump is president for the second time now in a situation where the country is so fractured, but he did manage to get in there again is a relief. But as I'm sure Mike will elaborate on, and I'll follow what he says too. the country has a long ways to go before this political situation that we're in now is resolved and ordinary people can have some sense of stability and hope for the future again. And that's one of the things at Citizens Doge that we're trying to provide.
All right. Yeah, it was such a culture shock to, I think, a lot of Americans that Trump could come in there and defeat someone like Jeb Bush and these other rhinos, and it was easy. It was easy. Every time, every week they threw someone up against him, and he'd throw him to the side. Go ahead, Michael. Tell me more about like that period of time transitioning to working
Yeah,
for
no
Trump.
problem. And yeah, those 2016, I always go back to some of those. I wish I recorded them or whatever, but those are some of the best moments ever. I mean, like you were just saying, Trump was just trashing everybody. They kept throwing. It was like they threw up anybody. I think at one point they had 16 candidates running in the Republican primary. I mean, that's insane. And every single one, he just kept knocking them down. It was a great sight to watch. Obviously, in 2020, it was a little bit different. He was toned back a little bit, um, and then 2024, he was also toned back, but he was able to win. But yeah, some of those original ones are just when he had no filter at all, and those are like those are going to be going down as like comic gold at some point. But anyways, back to my how I got involved. So yeah, so I saw Trump similar to Andy. I was like I didn't think much of him, and I came from like the libertarian side. I mean, so I'm not a hardcore Republican guy. I even tell people I would have voted for like someone that was like similar to like a JFK or I know RFK obviously entered the race. He just didn't get much traction. But I'm not based upon any political party. If a Democrat came around and they spoke my language, I'd certainly be willing to support if they have my values. But anyways, regarding all of the stuff, so I after the Ron Paul stuff, I stayed in the political stuff. I was constantly just watching the news, watching stuff. So that kept me at least informed of what's going on. And then Trump came around in 2016, and he came similar to what Andy said. He came to my area. He came to do a rally in Manchester, New Hampshire, and me and no one in my family liked Trump at all, except I had one cousin that did, and me and her went to the rally, and the line was miles long. I mean, this was like we weren't getting into this rally, like it was insane. And so what happened was really cool. Somebody was walking down the line of the rally and says, "Does anyone want to volunteer? Make phone calls for Trump. We'll get you into the rally, and you can sit behind Trump." And me and her raised our hand immediately. We're like, "Absolutely," because we figure we're not getting in. There's thousands of people out here, um, and so we raised our hands immediately. Nobody else did. I mean, we had thousands of people, and there was only about 15 people that actually volunteered. We went in. We were in the basement of this arena and we were just making phone calls to people, just getting out to the vote. This was 2 nights before the election as well, so we're just trying to rally support for him a couple days before the election.
Which, I mean, just to remind people of that time, no one thought anywhere he had a shot at winning. So you're out there making these phone calls, which feels like a Custer's last stand situation. I'm sure it had to, right?
Yeah,
What was the feeling in the room? Was it just this one of like, well, nothing else to do?
I mean the energy on the ground, I will say, was like you said, we had this miles, almost friggin' miles long of people. I mean, the energy was amazing, and I felt like, hey, we have a shot at this. But like I said, I mean, me and my cousin weren't getting in, so we said, "Oh yeah, we'll get in if we make some phone calls." Sure, why not? Right? So we were in the basement of this arena making phone calls. All of a sudden, Trump walks in, and like I said, there's only 15 of us. He comes in to thank the volunteers, right? And so I shook his hand. I'm like, I didn't even know I was meeting this guy. I just wanted to get into a rally. So he ends up like thanking us all. He gives us a little speech. Then they brought us behind him to sit, and what's cool is that was right on the camera shot. So they had, all the news stations and everything, and we're kind of like behind where Trump is standing. So I mean, I don't remember if I actually got on the news, but there was tons of news stations. So I'm sure there were some shots of me somewhere. But me and my cousin, we had signs. I mean, it was amazing. And during that rally, I mean, they brought out everyone. Don Jr. was there, Ivanka, everybody. I think Rudy Giuliani spoke at that time. I don't know if Mike Pence was there or not, but I think he might have came out, but they just kept bringing people out. So we had a front row seat basically to all of this. So that was amazing. So that was my first kind of volunteering with Trump, and kind of listening to him in those early days talking about building the wall, talking about the economy, talking about all these things. That just resonated with me because this is similar to what Ron Paul was saying back in the day. A little bit similar, no wars and all these kind of things.
I think that was a major appeal too, because we had seen now that Obama was just as capable of war as Bush was.
Yep.
And you know, for me, I had a lot of friends my age that went to Iraq, went to Afghanistan, and they came back, and they, they're never the same. And a lot of families, and with children involved, suffer because of what happened with them going over to Afghanistan and Iraq. And for me, I understand war is necessary in certain situations, but when you see the casualties of it, isn't just the people that are dying, but it's now people in your communities. Now that's funds going to help the support people who are suffering from PTSD. All of that was being ignored by Bush and Obama. And the thing that was so appealing to me was, I've been in construction all my life, and I've worked on custom homes that are, that were millions and millions of dollars. And I've
Wow.
met with homeowners that come through and are, take time to meet the plumbers, the electricians. They talk with you, give you coffee. And I've met the homeowners that don't even make eye contact with you. And Trump was the homeowner that would stop and talk to the apprentice plumber, the apprentice electrician, and for 10-15 minutes have a full conversation with you. And
Wow.
those are the type of people that, I think when he campaigned, he drew those types of people because, they had been ignored now for, 16 some years. Clinton did it well as well. Clinton was very good with that skill, but the other guys, no, not at all. And so like for you, you've now had this moment of not only helping in a campaign, but like now watching Trump actually become president. During that 4 years, are you still politically active, or what's going on during those 4 years with
Yeah.
Trump?
So I mean, like I said, I voted for him, and now looking back in hindsight, I wish I did more. Or somehow was able to get involved more, but actually, I didn't really get involved. I didn't know who to connect with. I didn't know what the infrastructure was. Like I said, I just volunteered to get into a rally, um, and so the next 4 years, I just worked and just like, paid attention to the news and paid attention to what's going on, but wasn't involved in specifically campaign life. And to fast forward, I had a friend who was working down in DC. He was like some kind of strategist, or I don't know what he does. But anyways, he was telling me about some of the stuff he was doing. We became friends. We were chatting, and he calls me up one day and he goes, "Hey, I got a job on the Trump campaign in New Hampshire." I said, "Oh my God, that's amazing! Like, cool." And I just said, "Hey, I love to volunteer. I volunteer for him at the rally, and I like what Trump's doing. I voted for him multiple times already. You know, I'd like to get involved." And interestingly enough, he was like, "Well, maybe I get you a job, but it would have to be on like Ron DeSantis campaign or Tim Scott or somebody. Like you'd have to start at the bottom." And I was like, "Well, we'll see what happens." And somehow he just connected me with his boss. He said, the guy actually calls me and he goes, "Hey, we're looking for a field director in Coos County." So that's in New Hampshire, but that's north of me about 3.5 hours away. So I'm like, I like Trump, but I'm not moving up north 3 hours away.
And for people who aren't acquainted with what that means, like myself, what
Yeah.
are you doing as a field director?
So field would be basically volunteer recruitment, get out the vote efforts, building out your connections, and and Andy has some experience with ground game work in a campaign as well, so he'll go into the stuff that he did. But I mean, you're putting out yard signs, you're getting out the vote efforts, you're door knocking. So I was door knocking and doing phone banks. Those were the two biggest things that I was responsible for. Bringing in volunteers. So it's just like on the ground. They call it field staff or field work.
It's a lot of work. I mean,
Yep.
you're not you're organizing, you're dealing with
Organizing,
personalities, you're dealing with, yeah, I get that. Okay, so and now fast forward here to Trump has won. Like what is the idea behind Citizens Doge, and what motivated you to go from canvassing and organizing for political campaigns to now? Go ahead, Andy.
Well, if I may actually add a piece of the story, and then Mike can go into the origins of our conversation. So Mike and I got to know each other first. I think we first met at an event in Loudon, New Hampshire. For those who don't know, that's where New Hampshire Motor Speedway is, just a little bit north of Concord. We met at an event there in August of last year. We were both doing canvassing and on the ground, as he said, all the sort of meet the grassroots kind of dirty work for different campaigns. I was with Lily Tang Williams' campaign for Congress. Very different scale, very different kind of team, different kind of challenges that we had. But I think we both found as we crossed paths more and more that we had similar feelings about kind of the way things were going, and similar feelings about the way things were going in the country. But at any rate, both of our campaigns made it competitive to the end. Trump against Kamala, of course, and Lily against Maggie Goodlander. Unfortunately, we came out on the short end in both cases, and I believe I can speak for Mike on this. We both felt that our races were eminently winnable, but that there were loopholes in strategy and in execution and in the kind of teams that we each had, particularly on the first two fronts, where it was just like, well, if we just done a little bit better, if we'd had a little bit more money, if the people at the top had been a little bit more responsible with how they executed the whole operation, it was going to be a different result. And that led to the conversations that we had later that ultimately led to the idea concept that Mike, I want to just stress this again for anybody who may not know, he is totally responsible for the whole idea concept that Citizens Doge is now.
Well, what is we've built it up now, I think, and what is Citizens Doge? Like, what is the purpose of this organization in New Hampshire, and what are your goals with creating that, even though Trump's in office?
So I'll just give the super short Cliffs Notes, which is that we want to use grassroots energy, activism, and organization and mobilization to close some of the loopholes among the liberty-loving segment of the American population, so that we can push back against the left in time to save freedom and liberty and prosperity in this country. And Mike and I both have great affection for New Hampshire. He, of course, is a native, and myself as somebody who has spent every summer of my life prior to this one in New Hampshire, a significant amount of the time, even though I'm from Massachusetts originally. And we both felt that New Hampshire would be a good place to start an outfit like this, because we just felt that there was a need with what we were seeing on the ground.
Yeah, and I can go in and kind of bring you up to speed. I was trying to give you the backstory and then how it kind of led into that.
I get excited and then I jump around. Just smack me around, dude.
You're good. You're good. I'm just trying to bring you up to speed. So I'll kind of fast forward how it all came through. So I got a call from the New Hampshire the Hampshire director for the Trump campaign. Basically, he said, "Hey, we need someone up north in New Hampshire," and nobody wanted to do that job. So they kind of got my name through my friend, and I said, I'm all set moving 3.5 hours north, but call me if there's a job opening in Manchester. So I live near Manchester, and I kid you not, 2 weeks later, he calls me, said, "Hey, I got a job in Manchester," and I was like, "You can't believe this! Like, I got a job with the president in my local area. I mean, this is amazing." So I go there, interview, I kind of start, and coincidentally enough, the person I was supposed to train with, who was already kind of running the Hillsborough County area, and he was also the deputy state director, so he was right underneath the state director. He ends up getting I don't know if he was fired or he quit. It's debatable. But anyways, he gets pushed out due to some drama. And so we didn't have a deputy director. And then we also had no one covering for Hillsborough County. And I kid you not, I even went to my boss and I'm like, hey, who's running the show here? He's like, well, it's you. I'm like, okay.
Baptism by fire.
Yeah, literally, it's like, yeah, you're running the show here. And like I said, Hillsborough County covers Manchester, Nashua, Milford, some of the major cities in New Hampshire. So it's obviously the most important. Um, has the highest population county in the state. So not only am I basically green, I just kind of got thrown into leading the most important county. Fast forward to the primary. Obviously, Trump wins here in the primary, and we had the election party. And to sum up this part of the story, I got home at like 11 p.m. that night after a long day, celebration, all that stuff. I'm watching the news just to see what the channels are talking about, and I think it was like CNN. I do have the clip somewhere, but it was a left leaning organization, and they said Trump outperformed in Manchester, New Hampshire, and it was like they were shocked and surprised by it. And so I somehow got that video on my phone. I recorded it and sent it to my boss, his boss. I sent it to all the top people in the Trump campaign, just to show like, hey, Trump overperformed in this area that I was leading, just to show like, hey, they took a chance on me and I was able to perform and over exceed in that area. Um, so to bring it forward, so I stayed on during the primary or the general election. Trump wasn't expected to win in New Hampshire in the general, but we did. We only lost by about 2.5 points. We were projected to lose by double digits, so
Yeah.
we did
Yeah.
we did make inroads. And kind of what I was mentioning earlier, they sent all of the resources to the battleground states. So I was calling, I was like yelling from the rooftops, "Hey, send us some stuff. Maybe we can get a rally." And they sent us some help at the very end. We actually got JD Vance 2 days before the election. But other than that, we had no real support. We had no real infrastructure. And like I said, we only lost by 2.5 points. So to Andy's fact, it was like, hey, if they gave us some help and some structure here, Trump might have won New Hampshire. But regardless, he won the country. He won all the battleground states. So I'm happy with all those results.
And you're operating, like you said, backs against the wall in New Hampshire for the general election.
Yep.
What did you notice among everyone beneath you was the motivating factor for them volunteering their time? Like, what did they talk to you about in the morning meetings before they went and hit the pavement?
Yeah, I mean, people were just economy is a big one, and the transgender stuff. People were pretty upset about. I mean, it's almost like the Democrats are totally opposite messaging, right? Like you couldn't be too further from the part. They want to raise taxes, right? They want to put men in women's sports. They want to do all these things, and we're on like the exact opposite side of every issue. So, I mean, people would just say all these different things. It wasn't
Well,
just
I
one.
mean, like people, I understand that, but to actually go out and volunteer your most valuable asset, which is time.
Yeah.
And I mean, Trump got this support nationwide. And I was just curious, what was the camaraderie? What everyone that drew everyone together? Because New Hampshire was supposed to be a blowout. I mean, he was supposed to get blown out, and to only lose by what you just said, was it 2.5? He said 2
Yeah.
points.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there was something more than just the logical side. What was the emotional drive of these people?
We had a really good grassroots outreach. We had a couple people in the state that were, yeah, giving all their time, all their energy. I mean, taking time off of work, calling out of doctor's appointments. Like people were, like I couldn't explain it what people went through. Like, and we as a campaign, we weren't paying people to door knock. Like other campaigns were paying people like $25 an hour. We were running on a very tight budget. And so yeah, we weren't paying people even gas money. I was trying to get some things for people, but in the primary we were giving out like tickets for rallies, and people got to meet Trump and certain things like that. But during the general, there was nothing, and people, yeah, they would take time off work. They would come out. So we had a really good grassroots. We did what they call flag waves. Andy knows a little bit about this. People would stand in certain areas with like just flags, American flags, Trump flags, and just wave their flags. and get support like from cars driving by or people walking by. So they would do flagways all over the state. They did these things called Trump trains. So we had everybody, we had at one point we had hundreds of cars doing this. All these cars would deck their car out with like Trump bumper stickers, flags, just paraphernalia of Trump or just American paraphernalia, and we would all drive certain routes. And we'd drive all over the state or certain areas, and we'd have basically caravans, 100 cars deep of caravans of all. You imagine driving on the highway and you see like 200 trucks, all American flags and Trump signs. I mean, that was kind of a big statement. We did a bunch of those, so
Sure,
those are
yeah.
pretty fun.
Yeah. And did you find you got a lot of support from the locals in your area, or what was
Yep.
the reaction in the day-to-day, door-to-door?
Yeah, most of it was fairly good. I'm still wondering how Kamala won New Hampshire. I mean, I didn't think she was going to win any state, and it goes back to some of the stuff from 2020. If I won't say it was fraud necessarily, but I think that could be another aspect you can bring into it. And then minus, they had a massive infrastructure here. I mean, it was funny because Harris had, I think, 15 offices, like 140 staff members, and then it was literally like, I'm not even kidding, I was the only staff member.
Yeah.
I had me and I had an intern, I think. And so it was like 140 versus one, and we had one office. And so it's just funny that we only lost by 2.5 points when they put probably tens of millions of dollars into New Hampshire, and we put probably 10% of that.
I'm curious because, and let me know too, Andy, what you think of this. But Trump wins, right? Most people pat themselves on the back, job well done, and then go back to not being involved that deeply into politics. And why is it that you guys decided, hey, Trump has won, let's start citizens? I mean, like, what's the time frame from Trump winning and being sworn in to you guys creating Citizens Doge?
So I'll let Mike talk about his experiences kind of in between the end of the campaign and when we really started to have conversations in earnest about what we would do next. But the short answer to your question about why the move, why the urgency now, is because the country's in a really bad situation. For all of the problems that Donald Trump helped ride into office for the second time on, he's addressing most of them, but the decline in people's standard of living and their hopes for the future, and in just so much of the social degeneration on countless fronts that we see happening around the country, these things are still issues to be dealt with. And if the left takes power again anytime soon, this is my personal belief that what we saw between 2021 and 2024, or between 2020 and 2024, will come back like a boomerang, but it'll come back harder. And if that happens, this country is in real trouble. And this effort that we're trying now is an attempt to forestall that possibility by getting people who really care about protecting their liberties, preserving their way of life, preserving their ability to practice their religious faith as they wish, their ability to practice, the whole spate of their First Amendment rights. All of these things we believe will be at issue, not just over the next 4 years, obviously, but over the next 2 years. And if a year from now, the writing is on the wall that the Democrats stand to take back power again, not just around the country, but in New Hampshire and in states like New Hampshire, where there is a divided electorate, we think that spells trouble. So we wanted to get something off the ground and quickly to just sort of engage people in a variety of different ways to go out and protect their liberties before it's too late.
Yeah, and I can jump in and give my interpretation on it. So, kind of just to sum it all up, and I know you asked me the question, so I just want to make sure I get there of how this all started. So after the election, I got brought on to the inauguration committee. So I went down to DC, was in the actually planning of inaugural events, which was amazing. So I had a task over planning the parade, planning all the movements of everybody. I went and visited all the sites. And just to backtrack a little bit, right after the election, I would say less than 2 or 3 days, I just had a weird feeling. I was like, we can't just like let this go. We can't just say, okay, Trump's in. I'm gonna go back, like you said, go back to my job. I'm gonna go and take a vacation. I just had a weird thing in my stomach. I was like, how do we gotta help Trump? We gotta get the grassroots to move forward. We can't just, oh, Trump's in and he's gonna do everything for us. I mean, and that's not. I don't think Trump ever even wanted, like, he doesn't want people to just do nothing, right? It's like the people need to step up and help and get involved, and then he's doing stuff on the presidential level that will help. But especially in a local town or local community, it's like Trump's not going to come into your town and fix it. He's not going to come into your state and fix it. And when New Hampshire, like Andy said, is so close, we're on the edge. We're also surrounded by Democratic strongholds. Massachusetts is a mess. They're basically, one couple votes away from becoming what New York is becoming. Vermont's a socialist country, or yeah, socialist state. They want to be their own country. With Bernie Sanders up in Vermont, you have Maine with Janet Mills. So New Hampshire is like just surrounded by all these commies, and we're like the last bastion of hope in New England, at least. And so it could go either way, and this is why me and Andy wanted to just get involved, because New Hampshire's motto is "Live free or die." I mean, we have no income tax, we have no sales tax, we have great Second Amendment rights. This state has a lot of good things going for it. But if the Democrats get involved and get into power, then we could wake up one day with an income tax, a sales tax, and they take our guns. So we're trying to get out this message like, hey, this is serious. We can't mess around, and we need to get involved. And so even before I went to DC, me and Andy wanted to kind of create a grassroots movement, anyways. And we had initial talks about, how do we do that? How do we structure it? And then I got called into DC. I worked the inauguration. Everything was great. Had an amazing time. Came back to New Hampshire, and I was like, okay, like I said, how do we take this forward? I got in contact with someone at the Doge department. So this is like how it kind of started for connecting in the Citizens Doge. I got contacted by someone in the Doge department. They were looking to set up Doge committees in the states. So taking what the federal level was doing with the Doge cuts and all that stuff, but looking into the states. I actually had a couple initial meetings. We found out that New Hampshire already had a Doge committee, which our governor signed into law. So we already have what's called a COGE team, COGE. So it's kind of convoluted, but it's not technically tied in with what Trump and Elon were doing. It's basically our state of New Hampshire set up a committee to look at fraud and abuse in the state. So going that route of setting up an actual Doge group in New Hampshire, I couldn't do because we already had the COGE team. But then I'm like, well, wait a minute. We were already talking about a grassroots effort. Why don't we just do a grassroots Doge movement and focus on the local towns? And so that kind of how it worked. It was like, hey, and then as we're talking, and it just something dawned on me. It was like, hey, the Trump is the federal level, right? And look at all the fraud and abuse at the federal level. Okay, but look at your town. Like we haven't found a town without fraud, waste, or abuse. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like some of these school boards are, as you probably seen all the news and stuff like that. I mean, that's where all these problems start, right? Those are where your kids are getting indoctrinated, where your property taxes are high. They're spending money like crazy. And I argue that's your town or your city or wherever you directly live is what impacts you the most, right? So everyone's focused on whatever Trump's doing, Elon's doing, federal level stuff. They're focused on whatever it is, the news of the day. But all this stuff is happening in the background behind the scenes in your local community. And you're complaining about your taxes, you're complaining about all this stuff happening, but it's literally in your town and everyone's just not paying attention to it. And so our pitch is getting people involved back at the ground level. Get your towns fixed, then you can worry about your state, and then we can worry about the country. But right, how are you going to fix the country if you can't even fix your town? So that's our pitch. It's like, hey, complaining about what's going on at the federal level, it's like that's not going to change anything. It's like, why don't you start making change at home first and then branch that out?
Michael, I think it's so interesting because I'm 38. So as a kid growing up in Iowa, I saw newspapers in our small towns slowly turn into shoppers where it was just coupons. And eventually these newspapers all closed down, or in some of the smaller bigger towns where there's like 10,000 people, they were bought out by some some corporation far away, and then they eventually closed them down, or turned them to online shoppers. Essentially is what they are, a bunch of native advertising. And I remember thinking, you know what an odd way to take control of the narrative, and to really guide people into, let's focus on what's going on in DC, let's focus what's going on in Des Moines, let's focus on areas where you can't talk to anyone, where the best you can do is write a letter or leave a message, with an aide. There was no personal accountability, and slowly they took the personal accountability away from the small towns first. But they had to replace it with something, so they turned it into a DC soap opera. And I've always wondered, how are you going to restore what the institution stood for, which was accountability, right? Because I don't think we'll ever see paper newspapers, back again. I doubt it. But there still has to be a way to hold, Esterville, Iowa mayor accountable for getting his son off from a DUI charge, or things as small as that type of corruption to, I don't know if you guys follow Long Island Audit out there in New York, but he started filming in public places, and the sheriff's department got so mad at him they started chasing after his own. I mean, he uncovered a whole district of corruption that went to the New York Supreme Court, and he won. Wow. And that all started from just a guy exercising a First Amendment right in, like you borrow your words, a commie state like New York. So so what you're doing there in New Hampshire is, it's along the same lines. It's just personal accountability. And how do you enforce accountability in a town? Like, what's your approach to that?
Well, if I may take this one, I think what we try to do as best we can is to encourage people to take responsibility for themselves, to engage with the issues that concern them in their own communities. I can speak just to one quick example. I won't name the community where I'm presently renting, but in New Hampshire, there's one town that's familiar to both Mike and I, where I attended a town selectmen's meeting 3 weeks ago, and I was made aware pretty quickly that the budget for the next fiscal year for the town had just been approved. And in the course of this one particular meeting, there were two groups who came in to pitch large money contracts for projects the town needed, one of which was for a pedestrian bridge, and the other was for some kind of ecological systems repair. And the last item and the third most expensive item proposed in the meeting was for a special project that required an excavator and something like a $90,000 cost. And I just want to reiterate again, this was all 2 weeks after the town budget for the next year was approved. I want to be clear that I don't think that these kinds of developments and these kinds of taking in pitches for new projects that may be necessary, that's a new phenomenon. The trouble is that we're at a point in our country where at every single level of government, we see municipalities, towns, cities, big cities, and the federal government run by people who really do not believe they are accountable to ordinary citizens. And at forums like this, even in a small town in New Hampshire or Iowa or Missouri or wherever else, you can see it. You can see it with your own eyes, but you can only see it with your own eyes and really feel the firsthand impact of that if you go to these meetings and you track what's going on not just with your own eyes, but sometimes I'm not suggesting people do anything untoward. I want to be clear about that. But if you actually make a record for yourself and for your friends and for other patriotic-minded people that hey, these people are spending this kind of money or doing these kinds of things, or there are grants coming into our schools that are overriding the will of votes that have been taken in the school council about, for example, like pornographic materials that are coming into libraries. All these kinds of things are things that ordinary people uniquely have the ability to, if not make a change about, certainly make people aware of, so that ordinary citizens as a group can start to push back against the incursions of some of these things. Because if we don't push back and do it through ordinary citizen action rather than through executive action, our towns are going to be lost. And if our towns are going to be lost, I think Mike and I would agree on this. Nothing else is going to matter.
And I think and correct me because you guys are experiencing this. So I'm just taking this in as you explain it to me. But I would assume that once people hear things that are going on in their own town, or it's told to them, you get one of two reactions. You get one, well, not much I can do about it, or two, which is just complete apathy towards the matter. So for you, like, what have you found? Because I mean, obviously, and you guys aren't the only organization. There's some down south. Spike Cohen, who's a friend of the show, runs youarethepower.net too. And he's huge successes in Georgia and in Texas and in some of these southern states, Florida. But up east is a tough nut to crack when it comes to corruption, because it's a family business. So it's a very delicate thing. What do you guys do to let people know what's going on?
Yeah, I can jump in, Andy. So yeah, basically to run off Andy's point, and we were looking, and we see all these problems happening in our towns, our cities, but the problem is no one was doing anything, right? Like, and people just complain, like you said, they're apathetic or they complain or, oh, there's nothing I can do. And so that's kind of where me and Andy jumped in. We're like, we felt an obligation to jump in and do something because I don't want to see my state go to waste. And there are people out here that care. It's just they weren't organized, they weren't mobilized. So we have people actually going out to school board meetings and getting results. So I'm not saying it's not happening, but the problem is it's like a one-off person. They're not coordinating with anybody else. So our job was to collect these stories, bring people together, and kind of help be the on the ground coordination for these things. So say a school board meeting's happening, we can blast that out. Or say something in the town, they're building a new school, or they're tearing down something, they're doing something that the people don't want, we can get attention on that. And so we're trying to be the coordination effort to help obviously individuals that are trying to make a difference in their town and give them backup and support, help them become aware of what's going on. And we're also, it's actually morphed into many different things as well, which is we can go into it. One of the things, actually, you have a flyer there, is a protest that we did. So as we started this, we were meeting with different GOP groups, meeting with other groups in the state, and me and Andy both looked at each other after one meeting. We said, "Oh God, this is worse than we thought." I mean,
What made you feel that way? Like, what was the moment?
So I'll put it that, I mean, and me and Andy go to a lot of these GOP groups. So most states have like a state GOP, and then they have county GOPs, or however they're set up, and then they have town GOPs. So New Hampshire, most towns have a GOP in their town, and then it's county and state. So we're going a lot of these county GOPs in towns, and I'll tell you this: we went to one town, and it was a big city. So I guess I'll say it's a city, and there was like 15 people that showed up, and they do meetings. I think they do maybe their monthly meeting. So their monthly big meeting, 15 people showed up. Someone from the audience says, "Hey, you haven't updated your website in 6 months." Somebody else yells, "Oh, you haven't made a social media post in 3 months." And oddly enough, the head of the GOP for the state of New Hampshire was speaking at that meeting. And so you can only pull in 15 people for the head of the GOP to show up at your meeting. and then someone embarrasses the group by saying they haven't made a post in 3 months or updated their website in 6 months. So me and Andy both look at each other and go, oh God, and so how do we help build out the infrastructure? And so that's part of it too. So we're creating kind of a sales funnel of volunteers to get in. So when a volunteer comes to Citizens Doge, they say, hey, I want to get involved in my local community. Basically what we go is perfect. We're going to connect you to your local community. And so we'll send them to a GOP contact for their town. Or what we're doing is we're building out contacts throughout the key contacts throughout the state. So we have our own Citizens Doge kind of captains in key areas. So I'm going to be sending that person, say, hey, connect with this person. This is one of our people for Citizens Doge, and then they'll connect them in their local towns. So we're kind of bridging in, getting people involved. So that flyer you showed earlier, that was, and Andy can go into it because he was there actually. Andy, why don't you jump in on that one?
Oh, sure. So the one of the activities that we have decided to engage in just to start making a name for ourselves while we're building up our grassroots contacts and our grassroots volunteers is we have a division that Mike gave the name our Citizens Doge Action Team or unit, which essentially goes to protests and tries to essentially offer a counterpoint to what the left is doing around New Hampshire and around the country. And the first opportunity we had to do this was at a law school commencement in Concord, New Hampshire, where Jake Sullivan was going to speak. Now, for those who may not know, and I suspect many listening may already know this, but Jake Sullivan is married to a woman named Maggie Goodlander, who happens to be the new congressperson for the district where Mike and I presently live. And she also happened to defeat the woman I was helping last year run in New Hampshire. But that's another story. But at any rate, when we showed up and had a team of just 6 people, 5 of us, myself included, holding signs which we thought were clean but provocative and sort of letting the passersby and that day's graduating.
Do we get an example, Andy, of the
What's
clean?
That?
Do we get an example of the clean provocative signs?
There's some signs on our Facebook page. If you go on our Facebook page, you look back and you'll see some of the. I think there's some videos and some stuff if you can pull them up.
All right, I'll go look.
So one of the signs said, "Welcome, Mr. Goodlander," which was a poke about the fact that both Jake Sullivan and Maggie Goodlander have been conspicuously evasive about who the other is married to, which is really strange since they're both very loftily positioned up in our national leadership class, even now, with Jake Sullivan no longer being NSA. But another said, Portsmouth is gorgeous because at the time they were still living in Portsmouth, very far away from where Maggie's congressional district is.
That's very tasteful. Very tasteful.
Oh yeah. Well, we thought it was in reasonably good taste.
Wrong.
We had an official in law enforcement coming by and check up on us, but he was pleased enough that we were determined to be civil, at least that they let us stand in position. But to make a long story short, there was 6 of us there, 5 of us holding signs, plus our video and camera guy, Andy Dow, who I want to give a special shout out to here. We were the only people there who were protesting or who seemed even the slightest bit aware that Jake Sullivan and Maggie Goodlander's presence at this commencement presented an opportunity to make ourselves known for the purposes of saying, hey, these people don't represent New Hampshire. No one else was there, not even a small crew from another independent media outfit. Nobody. It was just us 6. And I won't take the credit and say that's the event that started to get us some attention, but it did cross a few people's radars. And I want to also reiterate again, it was Mike's idea.
Well, I got wind of it. Somebody sent me a flyer, said, you know, Jake Sullivan's giving the commencement speech here. And like Andy said, I mean, he was actually involved. If you look at some of this auto pen stuff, I mean, he was involved, I think, behind the scenes more than people think. I mean, I think he was pulling some strings. And he's definitely involved with Obama and Hillary and Biden. So, I mean, he's a big political figure that's, definitely not representative of New Hampshire. And so I was calling people. I was calling the GOP. I was calling candidates. I said, you guys should show up here. And because the Democrats protest, right? I mean, if Trump say was going to come to your town or your city, you'd have hundreds of Democrats out there with signs. They, might start a riot or throw stuff, attack police, right? But then it's not fun. And I'm not advocating for violence, but I'm saying, like, so say Biden comes somewhere, right? And then we're not allowed to at least show up or like speak our mind. Um, and Andy did it, and Andy mentioned it. He said, we showed up, we had signs, we were actually very peaceful. We just wanted to get our message out. And we actually had, Andy didn't mention this, but we had her own mother came over to us, talked to us. We actually got an interview with her. We saw Maggie, we saw Jake. We weren't yelling and swearing and starting fights, but we were letting them know, hey, we're here.
Yeah.
We're representing the other side. And, we had our signs, and, they kind of scurried away. But yeah,
I lived in Colorado Springs for 4 years, and that's the last Republican stronghold in Colorado is Colorado Springs, and that'll soon be lost. And notoriously, the GOP party there was just infighting all the time, to the point where they couldn't get behind a candidate, and it affected every election. And I was sort of shocked, because I would feel like, man, especially when you had Trump in 2016 ride through, that's the time to really unite. And it seems like in these other states, like what you're describing in New Hampshire, maybe not infighting, but definitely a breakdown in the hierarchy from the GOP down to these local levels. And are you worried that the disconnect is going to sort of pigeonhole your movement, to just GOP related issues? Or is that the idea, is that you want to use the GOP party as the instrument to get new legislation or protect your rights?
Yeah, I can take this one. So and this is interesting because as being on the Trump campaign, there was actually a war going on between the establishment, which is like I'll just say the GOP was more establishment, and then the grassroots. So you still have these different people within, and like you said, I mean, the infighting. We had a lot of people within in the GOP organization that they weren't MAGA. A lot of them were, Nikki Haley or DeSantis or Vivek or other candidates. And then when Trump came, most of them came over, but there was still some other ones that were like the never Trumpers.
Lincoln Project. Yeah, Lincoln
Yeah.
Project.
And so there was this kind of clash between the grassroots and the establishment. And that's, one of the reasons why we keep losing elections, is because we can't get on the same page. And now the thing is with the grassroots, and Andy knows specifically because he ran on or helped run Lily's campaign. And on Lily's campaign, she was a grassroots candidate. She actually is still running, and she's running as a grassroots candidate. The problem with a true grassroots candidate is you're not going to be able to obviously raise enough money. Second of all, you're not going to be able to get the bigger endorsements or bigger people behind you. And so you're basically on an island. I mean, you're just out there trying to get the average person. And I hope one day we can get to a point where we could have a true grassroots candidate win. But unfortunately, the big money, the big power people are still pulling the strings behind the scene. And so when I was in the Trump campaign, and it's very delicate, I will say. So you have to play this game where you have to dance, and you have to, like the Republican Party, you have these fine dining and expense, $150 dinners, blah, blah, blah. And then it kind of leaves out all these grassroots people. And so I have to play this middle of the road thing, was like, I got to appease both sides and somehow be the bridge to keep them together. So yeah, it's very interesting. And so I made a lot of connections with these GOP groups because obviously during the Trump campaign, I was trying to get endorsements, trying to get donors, but I was also working with the grassroots. So I had a mixture of both. And so we want to strengthen the GOP party because we do see a need. And there's a lot of people in the GOP that just want to get things done, especially at the smaller towns and the counties. Some of the upper echelon of the GOP, they have problems, but I think we can fix it as a structure. So our job is to bring in grassroots, but also work, not say, screw you guys, we don't want your help. I'm saying, hey, let's have a broad open tent and let's find ways to work together. So that's why we have been meeting with these GOP groups. But I'll not be mistaken. We've been meeting with tons of grassroots movements, and we can go into all of our groups that we're working with. Because we're working with Turning Point, we're working with Young Americans for Liberty, Young Republicans, New Hampshire Federation for Women. So we have many different grassroots. We're coalescing as well as working with the GOP.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but just my observation, it seems that the problem you may find yourself running into or have been running into is, the transfer of power is never peaceful. And so we're going from a Senator McCain Rhino Republican stronghold over to something very different. That was, if you want to trace it back to the Tea Party, I feel like that was really the start of the fragmentation of the Rhino Republicans. And then it evolved into MAGA, and now we're sort of in this messy soup, and we have to sort through who's corrupt and who's not. And that's going to be there. There's plenty on both sides to go around. And I know in New Hampshire, you're dealing with a lot of corrupt Democrats, but I feel like if, you're, in order to bring in these grassroots, there has to be a purification and a willingness to go there. And I would assume there would be some pushback from the establishment on cleaning up too much.
Yeah, we actually had one funny thing is we actually door knocked for a candidate, and the picture is on our Facebook, but you couldn't believe, like, you should actually find it and put it up because it is hilarious. So we were promoting this guy named Ken Hilton. So if you scroll down, you'll see it. It's Ken Hilton versus Billy Butler, and we made a flyer. So this candidate is a family man. He's a plumber. He's a pastor. Just great guy. He's been a Republican all his life against. I won't go into name calling or anything because I don't do that kind of stuff. But you'll see the picture, and so against this guy Billy Butler, who you'll get the picture and then you can see. But basically the exact opposite of Ken Hilton, right? And Billy Butler actually won that election, and people didn't even know who he was, what he stood for. But people on the ground were basically like asking us, "Is Ken a Republican or Democrat?" And we said, we're not going to lie. We swayed Republican. He goes, well, screw that guy. We're not voting for him, blah, 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 without even knowing what his political stances are. Not that one. That one is the WMUR one we did.
That was for Maggie.
Yeah,
that was the Maggie one. That was
it's
funny.
just, I had to show it. I've seen this one here.
That's the one. Yeah, Ken. But then there's another one with the picture. So that's the guy we endorsed, but there should be a picture on another photo of his opponent. Yeah,
don't get distracted by me.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, that was another one of Maggie. That's funny. Yeah. So we've done some fun stuff. We want to make it fun, lighthearted. So that kind of brings people involved, and you got to be fun about it too. We can't be all there. It is right there.
Yeah.
So you can look at his opponent and not making any judgment, but this is what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And he actually didn't even stand for anything. I don't know. Andy combed through his website and we couldn't really find anything he actually stood on. But this gentleman actually won his election. And I think because people are tying almost any Republican at this point to Donald Trump, and the Trump derangement syndrome is now Republican derangement syndrome. Even if you have an R next to your name, you might even be a rhino. Just because you have an R at this point, you are, sexist, homophobic, racist, whatever they can add to your name without even knowing your positions.
Well, and this is the problem with only following the federal side. You on one side, and Democrats on the hard left are doing this. This is why you have Billy Butler running. It's because they are essentially of the same mind frame as these hard right, Nazi loving, Republicans, war loving Republicans. They're the same mentality, and that is all they're focusing on is what's being fed to them. whether it's MSNBC or Fox News, whatever fear mongering is being fed to them, they're reacting to equal measure. And the what's being lost is the normal people, which makes up the majority, who are being screwed over by their city councils, who are being screwed over by their school boards, who have no voice because all people think that is going on is what's being told to them in DC. And that's why your organization, I think, is just so important. I'm glad you came on our show, because there has to be a voice for the ridiculous things going on in middle of nowhere New Hampshire. The person that's losing their kid because of the school board, it needs to have that investigated and voice heard. The person that's getting taxed for I'm sure I would love to hear the type of stories you guys are now experiencing as it flows into you.
Yeah, Andy, you could talk about Mike, and then obviously some of this, like you mentioned earlier, some of the stuff you saw at the school board meeting. But
so there was so one of the people who was who's a volunteer and one of our principal backers from the very beginning actually attended a school board meeting in his hometown, the same town that I actually was referring to in my story earlier. And just through staying for the duration of the meeting and hearing sort of like the budget line item by line item listing through the town meeting, uncovered that there was a $5,000 allocation being given in next year's budget for the town sending limousines or chartering limousines to take kids to Logan Airport in Boston from this small town and from some of the schools. And whether that was a legitimate expense in terms of that's what it was actually paying for, or if it was just a cover for something that was untoward, one thing sort of led to another, and he made an appeal and got a motion to have it removed from the budget, and it was successful. There are many, many other stories going on in towns all around New Hampshire of significantly greater expenses being moved out of and being taken out of town budgets and taken out of school budgets. But the important point about this particular story and examples like it is that if examples like that are happening in some of the smallest towns in New Hampshire that people maybe 500 miles away may not even know about, they're happening everywhere, and God only knows how big that iceberg is. And what it takes first and foremost is people willing to show up and be the eyes and ears to say, hey, wait a minute, I didn't know about this. That doesn't look right. That doesn't smell right. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to tell my friends about it. I'm going to send out a social media post about it. If it concerns something that can be used to mobilize a text campaign for some future date to defeat a measure that's going before the town council or the town select board, send out a mass text mailing or text messaging campaign and get people to show up and get it defeated. These are the sorts of things that we think a movement like ours, a group like ours, can affect in doing. And if that model can be replicated around much of the rest of the country, we think that the means or the numbers taken out of town budgets that are being wasted, spent on gratuitous and excessive, useless things, and put back into people's pockets, lower people's property taxes, just make people's way of life better. We think that can have a positive impact. I want to follow up also just quickly something you said, Corey, about sort of the tendency of the liberty-loving, you could say even the right side of the aisle, to sort of fragment even in the face of Donald Trump winning. That's something that I've seen. Because I'm from Blue, Massachusetts, I've seen how these things can play out a little bit differently in Massachusetts and in New Hampshire. And basically, because Massachusetts is so blue, when conservatives get together in New Hampshire, and I imagine this is true in states like New Hampshire, where you have a pretty good mix of red and blue, but people feel the state is at issue all the time. It could go more red, it could go more blue. My personal experience is that in New Hampshire, there's more combating over the principles of things, even for people who otherwise, as Mike has often said, agree on 90% of all the issues. So principled people on the right side of the aisle or the center right side of the ideological spectrum, the tendency I think we have a lot of time is to focus on the 10% of the things that we disagree on, or the 10% of things that give us, personality conflicts in different forms, and to focus on those. And when we fight, we lose. And the left, by contrast, is so in lockstep in believing that people on our side of things are an existential threat to them and a threat to America and a threat to democracy, that no matter how much they fight, they unify in the end, and they mobilize for any purpose they feel they need to in order to, retain their sense of being morally and intellectually superior. But
I don't know if that's a good thing, though, Andy, because I understand it's to be envious of it, right? Because to mobilize everyone over the 10%, stupid issue that they've picked for this month is impressive. It still is like, are we going to get to that point where we're mobilizing for the extreme 10% on our side? Like, what's the check and balance there? And I think you guys have tapped into it, which is community based.
Absolutely. And I would say that's a really good question. I would say part of the challenge, and this is what I want to say, Mike has an incredible skill for and an eye for, which is understanding that as he said, the professional conservative, professional Republican element, and the broader, also and much more diffuse and diverse grassroots right of center or Republican element, they come in contact with each other, but they have different interests and they have different points of view. And that's not the only place where this kind of friction of fighting over the 10% comes in, but that is one place where it does. And what I really do want to give Mike credit for is because he's built so many relationships in New Hampshire throughout the grassroots and the professional conservative and Republican segment, he's created a framework that we think we can use to unite the professional conservatives and the grassroots conservatives in common purpose. And we think this is my belief that common purpose and a common sense of the urgency of what we're dealing with as a state and as a country is the most important thing right now. Because if we fight, we lose. And this is, again, just my opinion. Even though a lot of people are already looking ahead to 2028 in the federal elections, next year's elections in New Hampshire, in states like New Hampshire and around the country, will be a huge bellwether, in my opinion, will be a huge canary in the coal mine for what we'll be seeing coming down the road. And if we don't get it right over the next year, there could be a bad storm coming on the other side. So we need to unite in common purpose now through a shared sense of urgency and a shared sense that we really do have the same principles, even if we disagree on some things.
It is the design of the communists, and I'm not saying that jokingly, but if you look over how they took over the Tibetan government, and infiltrating there was the Communist Party and the Democratic Party. They infiltrated the Democratic Party and then created so much infighting that they created two separate parties. And therefore, the Communist Party, which had been left alone, proceeded to win out all the elections and then got rid of the elections. And I feel like I see the same thing developing here with Trump. And now, if Trump had lost, yeah, I get sick to my stomach to think what would have happened long term. I think it was over. But Trump won, so we don't have to worry about that. But now the infighting is not over, and that's what I really love about you guys is that the Citizens Doge is it's about the uniting of let's get past the TDS syndrome. Let's get past, what's going on a federal level, and let's find out, Andy, you got to find a better example than robbing kids of a limo drive. I'm just going to throw that out.
Yeah.
But
there's a lot more out there.
Yes, exactly. And just that, like you said, sure, it looked good on paper, but what was it, what was it being really used for? And in that type of, there's just no accountability. And I learned this. It was. I'll give you an example. It was fascinating for me because I'm new to the Kansas City area, but I found out that on government contracts, there has to be a certain amount of them that are bids that are accepted have to be from minority-owned companies. Now, had no clue that this was part of the deal for putting a bid in as a contractor. And so what I found out is that one company that is a large contractor here in Kansas City went out and bought up a bunch of minority-owned companies and then put their bids in. So, and then use their company to So, and that's, that's one example. That's just one example of government and the city just turning a blind eye to some of these issues.
Right,
And,
right. The altruism, this front of altruism. Hey, we want to diversify the people who get contracts to do business with the government. It just creates a perverse series of incentives that makes what may have been a corrupt situation or a skewed situation to start with even worse. It just skews it in a different way.
Yes, yeah, and but we're in a unique time where we can all talk to each other. I'm in Kansas. You guys are in New Hampshire, and I've talked to guys in Georgia, and there is, we're at a point now. I was telling you this, Michael, where everyone's establishing their little colonies of freedom and their beacons of not truth, but just letting people know what's going on and giving people hope that it's not just a shrug your shoulders, deal with it. Like, you can bring 30 people to a city council meeting and change the entire outlook of your city. That's all it takes.
Yeah, and we have an example of someone who I might have told you this offline. I'm not sure, but I'll tell you it here. We have someone who was basically doing the Doge stuff before even Doge became a thing. So she was able to rally, I'm not even kidding, 900 people to show up at a school board meeting in a fairly small town. I mean, they had down the entire road, like for half a mile, there's people, cars, everyone showed up at a school board meeting with 900 people and was able to get $4 million struck out of the budget.
Wow.
Yeah, and I said, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to find these people because, like, hey, that person, come share your story with us. I mean, we're not trying to capsulate all this stuff. We're not trying to make it about ego. So we want people to come share their story, and how can we replicate that, right? And we want to hear good wins. We want to hear even stories of, hey, my town's spending all this money, or I need help over here. And actually, this will dovetail into a video I'll have you play about a new initiative that we're undertaking, and it's called Doge Voices. And basically, that exact thing, and Andy was mentioning it in his last segment there, of getting people to speak out, share their stories. We want to aggregate all these different things so we can build a model of what's working, what's not working, kind of what's happening, and redirect forces of where we need, right? So if a town is doing something outrageous, how do we mobilize and get people to show up and coordinate? So we want to be the coordination effort on the ground. So we want to get more success stories rolling in. And so you can play a video when you can of a gentleman who is a county commissioner, and he's talking about some of the things that he's done. And I'll just let you play the video and you can hear from him.
This one right here, correct?
Yep.
We do this by separating our responsibilities into two categories. Number one, the core responsibilities that we're legally obligated to provide the taxpayer. And number two, all of the programs and everything else that do a lot of good but aren't necessarily legally required. We focus on category one and we say, what are cuts we can make? What are things we can make more efficient in our processes, in our systems? And we have a great discussion with our team so we can get to a point where we can keep the county running for the least amount of money possible. Then we look at the other categories, and this is where the hard decisions come into play. We sometimes have to make significant cuts, and once in a while, we have to full on remove some of those programs because it's frankly costing the taxpayer too much, and the ROI may not be there.
Can you hear me? We good?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're good. Did it cut out?
It was that's the whole video. 1 minute there.
Yep.
My name is Commissioner David Loveland Jr.
I think I started like halfway through, but
okay,
that's
no problem.
That's what they say. Libertarian podcast. This is the quality you get, guys. So.
Yeah, they're they're finding, they don't want us to speak.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let
so
me
he's
start
a
it over again. Let me play the whole minute again because I want to play the whole thing here.
My
okay.
name is Commissioner David Loveland Jr. of Merrimack County. And I'm proud to share that under my leadership for 3 years running, we've had some of the leanest budgets in Merrimack County history despite economic uncertainty and rampant inflation. We do this by separating our responsibilities into two categories. Number one, the core responsibilities that we're legally obligated to provide the taxpayer. And number two, all of the programs and everything else that do a lot of good but aren't necessarily legally required. We focus on category one and we say, what are cuts we can make? What are things we can make more efficient in our processes, in our systems? And we have a great discussion with our team so we can get to a point where we can keep the county running for the least amount of money possible. Then we look at the other categories, and this is where the hard decisions come into play. We sometimes have to make significant cuts, and once in a while, we have to full on remove some of those programs because it's frankly costing the taxpayer too much and the ROI may not be there.
Now, I do have a question because this has got to be a challenge for you guys. And I'm curious how you've overcome it. But when it comes down to budgets and numbers, the sob stories, they really get people motivated. How have you found out that uh, you have gotten people involved with trimming these budgets and this gross overspending? How have you built upon that?
Yeah, and so to backtrack all of this, I mean, we've only started about a little more than 2 months ago, so it just seems like we've done a lot in 2 months, I will say, and we're
That's,
building out this
yeah.
infrastructure. Um, and we've had people showing up to meetings. We want to get more people involved and more people to show up and aggregate our stories. And so that video there is a call to action of not only what David was doing as being a commissioner and getting budgets cut and running good numbers over there, but for other people to step up and share their stories. So, yeah, what
You
we've
you know
seen.
Dave here personally,
Yeah. We know Dave personally. He's been a great friend of ours.
and he's on the council. You said
He's a county commissioner.
county commissioner. I mean, is he getting a lot of pushback from his colleagues? And like, how is he like? I mean, because that's got to be great for him to find allies like you to back him up. Because I can't imagine his colleagues are too thrilled about budget cuts.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously needs help and people to back him up. But he's actually got quite a bit done. I'm actually really impressed. He's a young guy. He owns his own real estate firm, um, and we've seen a lot of younger people, and even Andy will say a lot of younger people are getting involved. I mean, we see 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds that are
Wow.
really getting in the fight. You see what happens with Turning Point and and that's Charlie Kirk's group, what they're doing on the college campuses, and really attacking these democratic strongholds and getting younger and younger conservatives involved. So yeah, I mean, he's very impressive for a very young age, and he's certainly getting pushback. But even through the pushback, they're still getting things done.
And you, like you said, you're building a foundation to something really great here. I've kept you guys for an hour and a half. I'm
Yeah, you're
curious
fine.
though. Well, I'd feel bad because I was like, oh, maybe an hour, But I always tell everyone that, and then I keep you longer, don't I, Andy?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's the ginger charm, I suck you in. So I'm just curious though. I'm just curious, like what plea to the public, if you had to give a PSA for Citizens Doge, what plea to the public are you making to get involved, to volunteer? They volunteered time for Trump, they volunteer time for these other things, they matter. Why give their time to Citizens Doge?
Yeah, I'll go first, and then Andy, if you want to
Sure.
jump in after,
Yeah.
because Andy makes a great plea as well. What I will say, in going back to earlier, because this matters the most, I think, in my personal opinion, and obviously everything that happens at town level directly affects you, right? So they raise the taxes, that's directly affecting you, or they're doing something in the school system that's directly affecting you. So I think this is more important. Obviously, getting Trump in office is, amazing, but the thing is, he needs backup. Like I said earlier, the people need to step up and do something. So if we want to see any kind of improvement or any kind of movement, like this could take years. Like as we've seen, this is a massive undertaking, and Andy even mentioned the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there's corruptions for this could take years to go through, and cutting things and eventually getting prosecutions. I mean, we need people to get involved now and kind of speed up the process. So that's kind of our plea. It's like this is actually the most important thing, and the best thing you can do for your country and your family is to get involved in the school system. And there's multiple things that you can do, which is great. Not just besides just showing up at a meeting, right? Like we want people to run for office if they feel obliged to do it. We want people to either join our network and show up at events or speak if they have knowledge on these things. I mean, so we're looking for all kinds of people to get involved. But yeah, the most effective is just show up at your meetings, come connect with us, and we'll do trainings and help people, and just surround yourself with other like-minded people. Because I feel like we've done several events now. We did one Friday night, and we're just kind of coming together, talking about what works, what doesn't work, what we're seeing on the ground, building this community. So when you're going out fighting in your own town, you can run it by us or reach out to us for help, or we can send out messages to, send you reinforcements. So all these different things, but our plea is this is the most important thing you can do. And more important than anything at the federal level is get your towns cleaned up. And so that's our plea right now. And what's interesting is as our group is called Citizens Doge, we're obviously here in New Hampshire. If we can create this as a blueprint and get things actually done here in New Hampshire and kind of turn the state around, I think we can duplicate this all over the country. And then you could see massive change happening throughout the whole country.
And people who laugh at this or mock at this, this is how what was the organization? Family Matters was it? Hey, it wasn't Family Matters. God dang it. Well, I forget what that organization was, but back in the early 2010s, there was organizations where people linked up and they go after Bill O'Reilly or Glenn Beck, and it was done on a national scale, and it was sort of the format that was pushed forward, but it was abused by people that wanted to really rob us of any liberty we had, and it's taken the right a minute to sort of recover from that initial hit, but now you have, I think, something far more organic than the Democrat Party was ever able to create, and there's real potential under a positive Trump 4 years where you could get a lot of momentum, and like you said, not just in New Hampshire, but I think like nationwide. But it doesn't happen nationwide unless the focus happens on the small town, the small community. And now, are you guys focusing just on like school boards, or is there a specific area where you want people to reach out that they specialize in?
So we and going back to some of our early conversation, that was our first focus, but then just seeing different inadequacies that we're seeing on the ground. So that's why we're doing all these other things, bringing in the grassroots, helping candidates. So we endorsed that one candidate, helped him go door knocking, trying to bring help with the GOP and all kinds of other things. But our core is yes, we need to get people to show up at these meetings. So it doesn't have to be specifically school board meeting. So you can do like city council meetings. You could do like state meetings. Just we want people. The overall message: get people involved. And being on a campaign, it's like you're pulling teeth. Because like you said, people work or people have kids. People need to make a living, right? So this is all volunteer based for now, and so my plea is whatever people can do, right? So if you say, hey, I got 2 hours a week after I drop the kids off at school or whatever it is, or I got my weekends free. We'll take that and say, okay, you got your weekends free. Okay. And we'll find something for you to do. And some people, don't like to door knock. Some people don't like to make phone calls. You get every excuse in the book, right? I don't like to do this. I don't like to do that. Our plea is like, what can you do? What do you like to do? What are you good at? If you're good at numbers, perfect. Maybe you can look at some data, look at some budgets and stuff like that. So just being open-minded, just getting people involved and finding out where they fit best. So yeah, it doesn't have to be just school boards. I mean, if somebody says they want to go door knock or do a phone call or something, we'll find ways for them to do
You're
those things.
triggering me to my past there. Every time you say door knock,
I did plenty of it. So yeah. Andy did too. He did a lot of door knocking.
Oh, I sure did. I agree with everything Mike said, obviously. And to just reiterate and to follow on something that you said earlier, Corey, I think that the tendency that a lot of people have to become disaffected, disenchanted, or separated and alienated from the whole idea of what's going on in politics is a natural tendency, given the way things have been trending for a very long time. But I think at the very same time, a lot of that disaffection or disengagement has to do with the way things are happening nationally and the dysfunction and the infighting that's going on in a distant capital that's hundreds of miles away from most of us. The most important thing I think we want to emphasize that is not we want to use as a way to make people understand what our group is focused on, but it's not necessarily a pitch for us, is that everybody has the ability to affect change, political and otherwise, where they live first and foremost. That is what is the most under every single person's direct control. It's like your own family. And this is myself speaking here. I think that if we can start to motivate and mobilize people to go out and work on accumulated actions to actually make a difference in their own communities and their own towns, and we can use the framework that we're building and through programs like this Doge Voices thing that we're just getting started up, to start to spread stories about things that we're all seeing, and so that these anecdotal things and these best practices can start to spread far and wide instead of just staying local to a few people. People on our side of the spectrum will be more engaged in politics on every level, not just national, not just state, but also their local towns. And that's the energy that needs to be sustained. If we don't sustain that energy, the tendency that I think we have, because this is just my opinion, that those of us who tend to lean center right on the spectrum of things, we're oriented toward politics, but we're not necessarily as oriented toward thinking of government as the be all end all solution to problems. But because the left sees things very differently, and because they have this pitched sense of being under siege and being superior to the people who would take America to a bad place, they just mobilize better, they sustain the energy better. And usually when things are at issue, and there's a competitive race, or there's a competitive series of races, or there's a competitive election, they win because they just sustain that energy better and for longer. We want to create something that counters that, so that energy can spread from our towns to our local wider areas, to our states, and to hopefully around the country, if that framework can work from the local level on up.
Andy, what do you, and Mike, feel free to hop in. What do you think is the energy that sustains the Democrat Party in those situations?
Well, at this point, it's anybody but Trump. I mean, yeah, they'll put up a Billy Butler. Like, it's just so like you mentioned my earlier, just the media, just it's just it's almost like they're zombies at this point. They're just so, it's like the Trump derangement syndrome, but now it's like Republican derangement syndrome. It's that singular issue of just like, we got to stop Trump at all cost, and it's quite brilliant. I don't know how they might brainwashed millions and millions of people into that thinking, but yeah,
Well, shout out to an older episode of ours. Check out P is for Propaganda on the Fantom Fact page. We go into the actual document of how of the propaganda campaign they used starting in 2013, and it was very effective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's just anything but Trump, and they use it very effectively, and I don't know if mind control or whatever, CIA operations, whatever it might be, but the Mockingbird media really has this thing figured out, and we need to break these chains, and that's kind of what we're trying to help people, and that's something that Trump did very well. Is he reached out to different Democratic groups. You saw what happened with like the RFK people and the Tulsi Gabbard people, and these middle of the road Democrats. We're actually working with a group called Walkaway. So this is Brandon Straka's group. So he was a Democrat that He was caught up in January 6th, and he got arrested. And he's like, "Wait a minute, I'm a Democrat. Why are you arresting me?" He got kind of caught up in all the commotion, and he said, "You know what? I'm done with this party." And so he put out a plea on his social medias, and he said, "Share your walkaway story." And now he's got millions of views. He's actually touring the country, and there's, oddly enough, a group in New Hampshire that's part of his organization called Walkaway, and we're working directly with that group. And so we're trying to build these bridges. Um, and like I said earlier, it's not just about Democrat, Republican. And Trump did this brilliantly, where he reached across the aisle and said, "Yeah, I'm a Republican, but I'm for the people. I want to bring in libertarians. I want to bring in everybody. We're not just, I only want hardcore Republicans." And so that's brilliant. And we got to figure out, as a Republican Party, how do we do this? How do we reach out, even as candidates, as groups, and we can play that same blueprint that Trump won on. How do we reach out? And so that's what we've been doing. I mean, we had someone from the Constitution Party speak. We had, like I said, this lady who is a former Democrat come speak at our event. We have all kinds of different groups. We had Turning Point, someone from them come speak at our events. So how do we bring people together and
And
just kind of work forward?
it's not just, it's speaking to everyone that can participate with you guys. It's not just the people that can speak and organize. Sometimes it's just as simple as showing up and just being the extra body. No
Yep.
other pressure than that, but just having your energy added into the group. It sends just as strong as a message as someone that can speak eloquently. And I think sometimes people get overwhelmed. They're like, well, I don't want to speak in front of a bunch of lawyers and teachers, and and it's not always about that. Sometimes it's supporting the person that's willing to do that. And like I think I'm surprised by the amount of people that are willing to just do that part, and it's a good sign for things to come.
We certainly hope so. And to what you were saying before about how does the left sustain it, I think that's a little bit more of, it's become a little bit more of a complicated question to answer than it would have been until recently, because of what's gone on with Mamdani in New York and the whole, the really radical progressive element that seems to be rising in the Democrat Party right now. But as far as the establishment Democrats, the establishment left, my personal assessment that I've kind of built up over following them for a long time is that they essentially sustain their energy on money and media and simple appeals to kind of a new age notion of moral goodness.
Yes.
And just one example about that, I don't know if you and I in our prior conversation, Corey, talked about President Biden's former speechwriter, John Meacham, who wrote a book called The Soul of America. But that phrase, which was, of course, co-opted by Biden and kind of defined at least his outward public persona during his presidency, I've seen it co-opted by a lot of establishment people on the left, including, I'm going to say here, I won't mention the fellow's name or where he was a public official, but somebody I know very well from my school days who actually migrated north to New Hampshire and became a town manager in a place that is about, I want to say, 45 minutes or so from where Mike and I are presently living. And he actually used the phrase, the soul of our community, in his State of the Town speech last year. And when my friends and I, who knew this guy in school, watched the speech, we were laughing our heads off, going, oh, he is just too slick for his own good. But people who have gotten to this position of public leadership, whether it's in small towns, medium-sized towns, or until recently the president of the United States, they make these appeals to this notion of moral goodness that can't really be questioned, or that they feel can't really be questioned, and they use it like a weapon. And we have to be able to call out their side for when they do it and what's really behind it.
Well, they taught us as a Jehovah's Witness that when you remove a spiritual a belief, a pillar from someone, it has to be replaced with something new that is of equal value. Otherwise, the person will crumble and return back to the pillar they had. And the Democrat Party, when it transitioned away from a religious base, it had a religious base for 100 years, and it transitioned into the new age science. It adapted that as its new religion. And I think that is sort of the root of the problem when you see everyone in force in the Democrat Party. And the illusion has been broken somewhat. But at the same time, there is a spiritual fervor by these people, because if you take it away from them, what are you replacing it with?
That's it. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, that's absolutely right. They've replaced whatever faith convictions they had in a traditional sense prior to this whole notion that they're part of a world-changing enterprise and that they're a white knight who's part of somebody who's bringing that enterprise into being.
Well, and it's it's dangerous because then you can convince people to really do, and we've seen it. I mean, we're seeing it. You can convince people to do anything, and to applaud them as they're doing it. And with the emperor has no clothes, Biden, we saw it in full display. And now that the spell is a little bit broken, I mean, these people, especially with what you guys really want to establish in establishing a foothold in some decency, and accountability. You're going to have to replace that religious fervor with something else. And I feel like there's nothing better or more moral than helping your own community. And so really that's, it's the best angle that you guys are taking here to really fix it at a communal level. Sorry, I rant.
No, you're good, and I appreciate that. We it's an uphill battle, but we feel like, as I said before, no one else was jumping in the mix to do anything, so we felt a moral obligation to do it. And the other thing I will say, the all these other groups, because there's groups everywhere, right? There's grassroots movements, and you even mentioned some of the other groups that have done something similar or are trying to do. Um, the problem is we're not in communication with each other, and my thing is we shouldn't be competing with each other, right? And Andy mentioned earlier, we agree on 90% of the issues as Republicans. It's like, why are we fighting publicly about these 10% we don't agree on? Let's figure out how to work together. Even if another group is doing the same exact thing as us, great. How can we join forces? How can we network? How can we build bigger communities? And we're not in this for ego. I'm not in this to be millionaires. I'm not in this to make myself famous, and Andy's not either. So we just want to get things done and help the community. And so we have no agenda, no ego. We're actually not tied with anyone, which is really good, because it's just me and Andy, and we have a couple volunteers helping us in a small team. But we can call the shots. We don't have any controllers telling us what to do or any big dark money. So that's why we can do protests. That's why we can do certain things that other people don't want to do. And so we're just here to help and get involved. And if someone else is doing the exact same thing, perfect. We want to hear from you and see how we can duplicate efforts and coordinate that.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
And just to follow that on really, really quickly, as I've said before, I've spent most of my life living in Massachusetts, but I have a long, I'll call it a love affair of sorts with the middle of New Hampshire in particular, because my family had a place up there for a very long time. What was interesting is that last year, which was my last summer that I got to spend up in this part of the state, up on Lake Winnipesaukee, if people know where that is, there's a town up there that I know pretty well that was part of the district where Lily Tang Williams, who I was helping, was running against Maggie Goodlander. And I took it upon myself with a volunteer or two from our team for Lily to canvass almost the entire town, which we did. Lily ended up winning the town in the general election, but by 1 point. On one level, it was a point of pride for me, but at the same time, I always thought throughout my life, even when I felt myself on a different end on the political persuasion, that this was a conservative place, that this is a place with, reasonably, people endowed with a lot of common sense who didn't, mind so much what was going on in Boston or what was going on in Washington, D.C. or wherever else. And even there, where we put in so much work in, the town almost swung to a Democrat candidate who we knew, irrespective of which candidate we were supporting, did not, did not live the way that the people in this community live, did not have the same values as these people. And at some point, much later on, I did think to myself, I don't want this place that I love and where I hope to have a home myself again someday. I don't want this place to be sullied or sent into a tailspin of decline that can't be reversed because people who don't believe in live free or die and don't believe in the basic spirit of liberty, patriotism, do your own thing in your own time, be a good person, be a moral person, all those values that we believe in. If those values go away because too many Maggie Goodlanders, not to pick on her, take over a place like this, that's not a future that I want forward for myself. That's not a future I want to see forward for my family or for the country. And so that's why I'm helping Mike with this, and that's why we think this is important.
How do people reach out to you to volunteer, to bring cases of corruption in their area or a misuse of funds?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a website, citizensdoge.com. I think you were pulling that up earlier. We have pretty much every social media now. We have a Facebook, we have an X account, we have a TikTok, we have an Instagram now, which I just created yesterday. Like I said, we started 2 months ago, so it's been a long and crazy ride, but we're catching up with all these things now. So people can certainly reach out. The best place to sign up would be our website. So go to our website, and there's a join now at the top of the page, and just put in your name, town, and phone number and email, and we can certainly add you to anything that's going on. We'll be putting out a newsletter with events and things, and then we'll connect you with someone who's maybe local to you. And then just one last thing, we've had other states reach out to us as well. We obviously Massachusetts is very close to us, and they're sending us pleas to help down there because they're even worse than what we are. We've had couple other states reaching out, so we see a lot of good progress. We're just trying to build this up and build out the infrastructure, and hopefully we can take this on the road and travel the country with this thing.
I point to what Andy said about looking around an area you love and watching it slowly deteriorate. And I'm from the Midwest, but I moved to Colorado Springs in 2017, I think it was. And I was watching the transition of New York and California move into that town. And what struck me was, at the beginning, I'm in construction and I'd have to, walk with homeowners and stuff. And I'd always ask where they were from. And in 2017, I'm from California. Oh, I'm from New York. And as I got to know the town more, I found out that there was less and less native Colorado Spring people that were from there. All the natives had slowly been shoved out of Colorado Springs. And I always thought that the irony in that, because here these left leaning liberals are all about helping the poor and sustaining, making sure they're taken care of. Yet when they moved into that area, they just slowly pushed everyone that was uncomfortable or a lower class 30 miles away. and it was sad because these are people that had grown up in Colorado Springs, and now that they were having families, could no longer afford to live there, and had to deal with a homeless population that was just kept growing and growing, so you couldn't walk or use the parks as it was intended. And if and that's a direct result of there being no organization that was willing to take on that responsibility. And so, and like you guys said, go to citizensdoge.com, especially in New Hampshire. Or, I assume you guys are willing to take calls from anywhere to reach out and organize.
Yeah,
And
we'll see how we can help, and see if we can get something set up in their town or state. Right now, like obviously we live here, but we're willing to duplicate efforts and take what we've learned and what we've kind of built out to expand that. Yeah.
All right, fellas. Well, I kept you for 2 hours, and I
You're fine.
appreciated every minute of it. It was absolutely fascinating. Before we go out, you did bring up Alex Jones, so I think that's only fitting. We finished the night with a little Alex Jones, and now we could do the indie, or we could do the rant on frogs. I mean, it's up to you guys.
Maybe the frogs. I will say, full disclosure,
frogs.
I do not watch Alex Jones as much anymore. But
Well,
he did get me my start.
Yes,
Sorry.
if you grew up, I mean, you eventually outgrew Alex. Alex Jones was the John the Baptist of the war for your mind. He just opened it up, and then hopefully you grew out of Alex Jones. All right, everyone.
Yeah.
He was right about the frogs.
He was right.
Store the paradigm of absolute control. And that's why we're just out here doing simple things, pointing out that we're meant to be in nature and be natural. And this is where we find the source that God made to transcend the New World Order. And that's why they want to try to keep us out of it.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.